to teach the deen, it is extremely dangerous for him to go into the field of da'wah. And when a person refuses and refrains from saying, I don't know, la adri, Allah alam, then it's, we say what? It's nothing embarrassing about saying, I don't know. Rather, Ibn Sa'di, he said, it proves the virtue of the alim. And it gives you confidence for that which he does know and that which he does give the answer for. In other words, if this great scholar says, I don't know, that means when he says it's halal, it's haram, hadith is sahih, the hadith is da'if, in most cases he's what? He's what? Strong. He's strong. That he's read a great deal on the topic for him to give that definite, decisive answer. And the moment he says, Allahu A'lam, that proves how much he does know. Everybody understand this? Let alone the concept that when the alim says he doesn't know, he will go back and he'll read and research and he'll get even more benefit. Or in some countries, such as Yemen, when an issue is brought up, a question is brought up, or even in Medina and other places, and the sheikh, he doesn't know the answer, one of the tulab will go to the library and he'll bring him volume 6, page 250 here, and he'll give the benefit for everyone. I've seen this with my own two eyes several times. Issues come up, things come up, he's not sure about it, the tulab, to go to the library, and they give the fa'idah. So the point that we're trying to bring is that when you're precautious, and you refrain from speaking on things that you're not sure of, even if you have some knowledge on them, the khair is more. Everybody understand this? And there's going to be further embarrassment when you lie, when you answer something that you're not sure about. You may get out of it the first time, maybe the second time, but the third time, you're going to be what? Exposed. That you're fraudulent. So it's very important etiquette for all of us, especially those who adhere to the hadith culture, is to beware of lying upon the Prophet ﷺ. Now, we have some Muslims, unfortunately, they say we don't lie upon the Prophet ﷺ, but we lie for him. We lie for his cause, for his sake. In other words, the Muslims are, they don't benefit from the traditional lectures. They're boring, as they say. Or as some may say, Islam cannot just be in the masjid. Knowledge is just not to be in the masjid. It has to be something different, something new, something modern. Or as some people say, it's not the time to read Sunan Abi Dawud. We don't need these books. And the average Muslim can't benefit from this. He can't learn from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Or as another man said, a famous doctor in Islam, he said that the study of the Prophet ﷺ, sunnah in detail, is not the most relative science of Islam. It's not relevant for the West. It's not relevant at all. People, they say statements like this. How can the study of Muhammad ﷺ's life in detail be irrelevant? Doesn't make any sense. So the point that we're trying to get to is that there are many people who have these derogatory notions towards hadith, and some of them, it causes them to lie on the Prophet ﷺ. And they said we must fabricate hadiths now. We must make up rewards for reciting Surah Yasin and for going to the janazah prayer. You have to make up hadiths for a woman not to pray in her house and to pray in public, because the original authentic sunnah is not enough. We say these people, they're included what? In this punishment. They will go to the fire. Waliyadu billah. Those who lie upon the Prophet ﷺ with any intention. Now, the concept of fabrication in the hadith culture, why hadiths were fabricated, how they were fabricated, how many they were fabricated, is a separate branch of study. Al-wad'u wal-wadda'un. You study about hadith fabrication and the hadith fabricators. That's a separate field of study. Let's move on. Chapter number 5. The author rahimahullah, he says, باب الكلام في كتاب الله بلا علم. حدثنا عبد الله بن محمد بن يحيى قال أخبرنا يعقوب بن إسحاق المقري الحضرمي قال أخبرنا سهيل بن مهران أخو حزم القطعي قال أخبرنا أبو عمران عن جندب قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من قال في كتاب الله برأيه فأصاب فقد أخطأ. Translation says, hadith number 3652 under the 5th chapter, which states, speaking about the book of Allah without knowledge. Abu Dawud rahimahullah says, chapter 5, speaking about Allah's book, Allah's speech, the Quran al-Kareem, without knowledge. We see how appropriate this chapter is to the what? Previous chapter, and that they're related. Lying upon the Prophet ﷺ, making tafsir of the Quran without proper knowledge. They're sisters. And they all go back to one mother, which is, or one father, which is what? or a father and a mother. The father is ignorance and the mother is audacity. Ignorance and nerve. I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm not properly educated, and yet and still I have the nerve to do what? To speak, and I don't have the humbleness to refrain from speaking. Everybody understand this? This chapter heading number 5, with chapter heading number 4, clearly proves that the scholars of hadith had fiqh. They had understanding of the narrations. And they didn't just quote hadith as people say without any understanding. He knew that this chapter will be appropriate with what? The sister chapter. Everybody understand this? Khayr, inshallah. So therefore, this is another ruling that is haram, a major sin. And it also teaches another adab of refraining from speaking about the Quran without knowledge. This is even, Allah knows best. Allahu A'lam, which of the two is more widespread? People speaking about the Quran without knowledge, or people speaking about the Sunnah without knowledge? There are many people today who talk about the Quran as tafsir. What does it mean? How is it relative? How is it isn't relative? Why this verse was sent down? The context of this verse, of that concept, hijab, polygamy, jihad, ruling with what Allah or what other than Allah has sent down, beating women. The list goes on. Things that are mentioned in the Quran, that there are so many people who talk about them with total ignorance. And they mix and they jumble and they confuse concepts, unfortunately. And there are a great many people who talk about the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, as we previously explained. Perhaps the Sunnah is worse, because there's a general regard for the Quran for those who say they're Muslims. There's a general regard and respect for Allah's speech for everyone who claims to be a Muslim. But there's some people who say that they are Muslim and they reject hadiths. Waliyadu billah. And as the Arabs, they say, Ahlahuma mur. He says, the sweeter of the two is what? It's still bitter. The sweeter of the two is bitter. So this chapter heading is teaching us that it is unlawful to talk about the Quran unless you have proper knowledge. Abu Dawud rahimahullah, after mentioning his chain of narration, he narrates from Jundub radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam said, those who speak about Allah's book برأيه, with their own opinions, فَأَصَابَ فَقَدْ أَخْطَأَ, they are sinful even if they're right. They're what? They're sinful even if they're correct. In simple layman terms, if you're asked about a verse, what does قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ mean? Or where was it sent down? And who was Allah speaking about when He said that? And He says, I think it was sent down in Mecca. I think it means fulan and fulan. And you're right. That is the actual valid piece of information. Then you still get a what? You still get a sin. It's still what? Haram. It's still haram. Now, this hadith is not the most authentic narration. It's isnad. It's problematic. And some of the people hadith, they also mention that the actual text, some things are problematic. We want to get into those technicalities right now. What is important is a very crucial understanding that you must have of this hadith. And that is, to simplify it, it is haram to make ijtihad if you're not qualified, even if you're right. Even if the fatwa that you give, even if the ruling that you pass, even if it's sound, if you're not properly trained, it is what? Haram. And you do not get a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your ijtihad and your fatwa. Rather, you get a sin, even if you're what? Even if you're correct. And this is in contrast to the alim, or the strong student of knowledge. And Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala explained, he says that a talib al-ilm could be mujtahid. A talib al-ilm could make ijtihad. Whether he's a complete mujtahid, or whether he's a restricted mujtahid. Whether he's mujtahid in an issue, or 2 or 3 or 4, or whether he has become very strong in knowledge in general, even though he's not necessarily what? An alim. And that's a word game. What is an alim? What is a talib al-ilm? Here in the West, who's a sheikh, who's a student, who's a da'iyah? Those are all words and terms. Everybody understand this is all what? Words and terms. What is important is the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, collected in the Sahih, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he told us that when a ruler makes a ruling, and he performs ijtihad, and he's correct, he shall receive double reward. And if he makes a ruling, performing ijtihad, and he makes a mistake, he gets what? One reward. He gets what? One reward. In other words, and his mistake is forgiven. The hadith clearly states that we have إِذَا حَكَمَ الْحَاكِمِ, the qadi, the alim, who's mujtahid. And what's meant by mujtahid is that he is independent. In other words, it's hypothetical. I have studied the Quran. It's not a condition I've memorized the Quran. As many people think, it's not a condition for mujtahid to be hafiz of the Quran. I've memorized what I need to memorize from the Quran. I know the asbab al-nuzul and the qira'at that pertain to fiqh rulings. Everybody understand this? Not every qira'ah, but the qira'at that talk about wiping over the leather socks, a woman's وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. What is a qar'? What is there another recitation? When a woman is divorced, does she wait for her mints, or does she wait in her pure state? I've studied these issues. I've studied the Arabic language, nahu, sarf. I've studied a great deal of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. I've learned what is authentic and what isn't authentic and why. I've studied the basics of fiqh, and I've studied the khilaf, and also the ijma'. In other words, when I become a well-rounded person, I now have the liberty of doing what? Of doing ijtihad, which means, if you ask me, ya akhi, what is the ruling of wearing a black jalaba? This black thobe right here, what is the ruling on that? I don't have to say, Sheikh Fulan said, Imam Abu Hanifa said, Imam Ahmed said, but I can now do what? Go to the Quran directly, go to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ directly, and do what? Astakhrij. I can extract and take a ruling. I say, it is haram for me to wear this because of this verse, because of the tafsir, because of this hadith, so on and so forth. In other words, I'm independent. I don't have to cling and attach myself to a specific school, a specific madhab, a specific what? Fatwa. I'm now mujtahid. Now let's say I'm wrong in that issue. And then what I said is batin, you can't wear a black thobe. I'm wrong. Because I'm qualified, and inshallah I was sincere in that, I now get a what? A reward, ajr from Allah, Allahu Akbar. And the mistake that I made is what? Forgiven. But I only was overseas for a couple of years. I didn't memorize what I was supposed to memorize. I didn't study properly. I'm not an expert in the Arabic language, in the tafsir, in the Quran. And I think it's permissible to wear black. And that is correct. I now get a what? A sin, a khata, a sin. Even if I'm right, why do I get a sin? What's the reason behind me getting a sin? I don't have the proper training, the proper knowledge. In other words, it is unlawful for someone who didn't go to medical school to make a what? Huh? A what? Yeah, in other words, you can Google something, my finger hurts, it's swollen, oh, that means that I sprained my pinky finger. You're not a doctor. You aren't a nurse. You didn't study any type of formal medicine. So therefore, it is not for you to make a what? A reservation, an opinion, an independent ruling on something that you haven't studied, even if you're what? Even if you're right. Let's simplify this. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that every single human being agrees, Muslim and non-Muslim, if a person goes on a journey, he leaves his home, he travels, and he doesn't know the road. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't have the proper direction. And he reaches his destination. To all human beings, that man is a fool or one who's wise. Which of the two? What would you call him? A foolish man or a wise man? Which one? Let's repeat, let's go back. We leave New York City. We don't use GPS. We don't know how to get to Canada. We say, Bismillah. Just get in the car and let's just drive north. But we got to Toronto. We made it to Abu Hurairah Center. We made it. We had no direction whatsoever. Would you call me a fool or a man of wisdom? Without a doubt. Even if I did what? Even if I made it. Why am I a fool if I made it? Because that's not the sunnah of life. You don't do things like that in life. You just don't go out and just on a limb and say, Bismillah. You don't do that. You know what? You don't do that. So if that is life, if that's the dunya, then what do you think about the speech of who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran al-Azim. To make tafsir based off of your own opinion. So this hadith, it teaches us that even if you're right, and there are many da'is and du'ats, they say this, but our classes are beneficial. The people, they learn. Is this not the case? He says people have accepted Islam through me. Thousands of people have accepted Islam. I defended the deen. We say that you're still what? If you're not qualified for that, then it's still what? Wrong. It's still a khata. Because it's haphazard. It's dangerous. You don't do things like that in life. Everybody understand this? Inshallah, meaning of the hadith clear or not? So therefore, it is haram to make tafsir of Allah's book unless you have studied what? Tafsir. And the other sciences of Islam. Let's move on to the next chapter. Imam Abu Dawud rahimahullah ta'ala, he says here, باب تكرير الحديث. حدثنا عمرو بن مرزوق قال أنبأنا شعبة عن أبي عقيل هاشم بن بلال عن سابق بن ناجية عن أبي سلامة عن رجل خدم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان إذا حدث حديثا أعاده 3 مرات. Hadith number 6 states repeating hadiths, or chapter number 6 states repeating hadiths. This chapter heading, it means it is recommended, it is preferable for one who is teaching to do what? Repeat himself. And there's nothing wrong with repeating the hadith. It isn't disliked. It isn't haram. It isn't a means of lack of knowledge or stupidity, but it is a sign of thorough teaching. It's a sign of what? Thorough teaching. Abu Dawud rahimahullah, he gives you his isnad that goes back to Abu Salam, who narrated from one of the servants of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whenever he spoke, whenever he gave the people a hadith, he would repeat it 3 times. It states in Sahih Bukhari, and another version of this narration, or another hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu, that whenever the Prophet ﷺ went to a people and gave them the salams, he would give them the salams 3 times. And whenever the Prophet ﷺ spoke to a people, he would speak to the people 3 times. The narration says, so that they would understand his words. So that they would what? Understand his words. In our compilation on 40 hadith on seeking knowledge, we made a chapter, and we called that chapter, Repetition is the Key to Understanding. Repetition is the what? The key to understanding. There isn't anything more beneficial for a student of ilm, a student of hadith. You don't understand it, before you ask, read it a 2nd time. Read it a 3rd time. Read it a 4th time. Read it a 5th time. Perhaps, if it's that difficult or unclear, perhaps Allah will give it to you just from your hard work and sincerity. Someone who's sincere is going to sit down and continue to go over it until he gets it. As for someone who isn't sincere, then he's going to quit. He's going to quit. Everybody understand this? So the concept of repetition in the deen for memory, the concept of repetition for understanding, and most importantly, the concept of repetition for solidifying the ilm in your mind. How does this person recite the Quran like that? By heart. Because he has repeated it so many times. Day after day, hour after hour, year after year, Ramadan after Ramadan, he goes over and over and over again until the Quran is permanently placed into his mind and in his heart. How do you memorize an entire book of hadith, thousands of narrations, through what? Repetition. Why are the ulama so knowledgeable and so learned? Because his beard is gray, and he was teaching this book of hadith when his beard was black. He was teaching this book of hadith when he didn't have a big beard. In other words, 10, 20, 30, 40 years have passed by, and he's been doing what? Repeating it, and over and over and over again. So take the benefit. A young student of knowledge, you have to discipline yourself to have repetition. And indeed, we've seen people in the Prophet's masjid specifically brothers from Mauritania, who would repeat one hadith 300 times. They would repeat one sentence 300 times before they would move on to the next hadith or the next sentence. And some of people say, how can you do it 300 times? You know how long it's going to take to memorize 10 hadith? But those 10 hadith that he memorized are going to be what? Firmly burnt into his memory. As for the person who opens up the book, who closes the book, and he moves on and he takes the exam, wallahi, he is going to forget tomorrow, next week. He's not going to know any of those hadiths. So constant repetition is paramount. We want to stop here in the next subhanahu wa ta'ala in this 6th chapter. And hopefully tomorrow night, bi'idhnillah, we will take chapter number 7. And by the barakah of Allah, the Sublime, the Exalted, we will try our best to finish the entire book. We've made okay progress. As you can see, we try to explain the hadiths in depth sometimes. Perhaps tomorrow we'll just namur kiram, just go a little, inshallah, move a little quicker, that way we can finish our goal. Before the adhan is made, I don't know if it's time for the adhan. If anybody has any comments or anything that you would like to add, or any questions on the topic or off the topic, now is the time. If anyone has something they want to add, something they want to correct or fix from the brothers or the sisters on the topic or off the topic, now is the time. Jazakumullahu khairan. Tafadhal.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. What if you're just sitting with a friend and he holds one opinion, like you read it somewhere about a specific guy and you read the same thing and it's about, and you hold a different opinion, but you think that it means A and he thinks that it means B, so how does that go?
طيب بسم الله لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله اللهم إني أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Question says, in brief, summary of the question is that me, my friend, we differ on the meaning of a verse from the Quran al-Kareem. I say A, he says B. I read this, he read that, so on and so forth. In other words, does this mean that I'll get a sin? We say there is a difference between teaching, giving a ruling, and between studying. It's a difference between ta'lim or ifta' wal munaqasha wal mudarasa. Me and my friend, we are quote unquote sparring with each other, fencing with each other. He says this, what do you think about the verse? Well, I read Ibn Kathir, I don't know. We're practicing to get what? Better. That is not the same as me sitting on a stage and saying the verse means A. And I didn't read, I didn't study, I'm not properly trained and thoroughly read. What I did is haram, what you and your companion did is praiseworthy. It's a good thing. So whenever a teacher or someone calls upon you in a class and he says, what do you think? What does this hadith mean? What does this chapter mean, awali? We say what? It is not good for you to sit and remain silent. It's not good. Rather, you should try. Say what you think. Say what you feel. It doesn't mean you're giving a fatwa. Or some others, they say, well, I don't know, I haven't read. No, as you said, I'm not sure. You should say something. And that is because from the etiquette of a circle of hadith is that the teacher has rights upon the student. And the student also has rights upon the teacher. Just as if I said, no, I don't want to take your question. I don't feel like it. Who are you? I'm done. I gave my lecture. I'm leaving. You consider me to be very what? Rude. Very rude and ignorant. Is this not the case? I just asked a basic question. He was so stingy with his time. Get away from me. I don't have no time for your question. It's rude. And the same applies if I said what? For a brother to do what? Participate, and he remains silent. Just like it's my haqq to ask you, it's your haqq to do what? Ask me. Vice versa. Everybody understand this? It's mutual. It's what? It's a relationship that's mutual. So therefore, there's nothing wrong with trying to find the right answer. There's nothing wrong with trying to study. And there's nothing wrong with responding to a question that your teacher asked you. And there are many hadiths like this, in which the Prophet asked the companions about certain things. Some of those hadiths clearly state, the companion said, Allah and His Messenger know best. But there are other hadiths in which the Sahaba used what they had and said what they thought. A simple example of this is the authentic tradition in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Atadruna man al-muflis." He says, do you know who the bankrupt person is? Who the muflis is? What did the companions say? Al-muflisu fina man la dirham lahu wa la mata'. They said the muflis to us, yani the Arabs, is one who has no gold coins, no camels, no water, no tents, no palm trees, no nothing. That's a bankrupt. And then the Prophet ﷺ, he says, however, the real bankrupt person is so and so and so forth. The one who comes on the Day of Judgment and he backbit the people and cursed the people and beat the people. The highlight from the hadith is what? Is that the Sahaba, what did they do? They used their what? They made ijtihad. And they gave the answer that they knew or that they thought. Both, perhaps. But it wasn't the proper answer, and it wasn't what the Prophet ﷺ what? Wanted. Another example is the famous hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma in the Sahih, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he asked the companions and he explained to them the similarity of the believer and a tree. He says there's a similitude between a believer and a tree. What did Ibn Umar say? فَوَقَعَ النَّاسُ فِي شَجْرِ الْبَوَادِي. He says most of the people, they thought about the trees in the desert and the wasteland. And he says, me, I knew that it was speaking about what? The nakhla, the date palm tree. Everybody understand this? And we go on hadith after hadith after hadith. So therefore there's a difference between studying with your friend, sparring and fencing, and between giving a fatwa to people, a public ruling. That's like night and day. Alhamdulillah. Wallahu ta'ala. For the Khalil.
You kind of mentioned yesterday about like some of the latest scholars saying not permissible to use the weak hadith, but that wasn't the practice of the early scholars. What is it permissible to actually use the weak?
Right. Question says, you mentioned yesterday that some of the later scholars held the view that it was impermissible to use a weak hadith or to mention a weak hadith or to have the weak hadiths with the authentic hadiths. And we said, or you said, that there are some of the earlier ulama, they didn't say this. So when is it permissible to use a weak hadith, etc.? We say first and foremost, there is a difference between using and between mentioning. There's a difference between mentioning and using. And this is what I believe, you said this last night. We have riwayah and then we have amal. Just like the chapter heading in Sunan Abi Dawud. Riwayatul hadith an Ahl al-Kitab. Narrating from Ahl al-Kitab. And not necessarily believing them or implementing and practicing what they say. So therefore, this question is a very crucial, important question. Or crucially important question. Tayyib, is it permissible to mention a weak hadith? Is it permissible to act upon a weak hadith? We say before we get this far, we have to understand what is a weak hadith. What is a what? A weak hadith. And what is an authentic hadith? Alhamdulillah, we've done several lectures on this on the YouTube channel, Hadith Disciple. Please go back to the channel, Hadith Disciple, HADITH DISCIPLE. If you Google it, if you YouTube it, I don't know if that's a verb yet, YouTube. Some say Google is a verb now. If you search that, you'll find several classes and lectures in which we have explained what makes a hadith authentic and what makes it inauthentic. In brief, we'll say here tonight in Toronto is that a hadith da'if is a hadith that fails to meet the standards of maqbool, hadith that is accepted or acceptable, whether it is sahih or hasan. A hadith that is accepted, it has conditions and prerequisites. Any hadith that fails to meet those prerequisites is now considered to be what? Da'if. Regardless of its meaning, regardless of its content, if it fails to meet those prerequisites, it is now considered to be what? Da'if. It's classified as what? Da'if. Let's make an example of this. You have a classroom of students. In the classroom, there's a student who's very smart, very bright. He's absolutely brilliant, but he's lazy. Or he's a, I say, class clown. He makes fun of the teacher. He doesn't take the class serious. He thinks or he feels, and maybe in reality he knows more than the teacher. The teacher is a fool. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He can't teach calculus. I know better than him. I don't have to go to class. Everybody understand this? So he doesn't study well. He doesn't respect the teacher. He misses class. And on the day of the final exam, he didn't wake up, he didn't study, and he got up late. And he got there 10 minutes too late and say, no, you can't take the exam. He said, what? You can't take the exam. On paper, what grade will the student get? an F. Right? Even though he could have got an A+. He's the smartest student in the class, by far. But scientifically, he's classified as a failure or not. So it's a concept. Why? Why is he a failed student? Because he's stupid and dumb? Because he did not meet the what? The criteria, requirement, and the grade. So hadith which is da'if is a hadith that fails to meet one of 4 main prerequisites. One of 4 conditions. 4 of them. Number 1 is that the hadith, obviously we didn't meet the Prophet ﷺ, nor do we meet Imam al-Bukhari. So the hadith had to come from somebody, had to come from somewhere. And that origin is brought to us via something else. It's a bridge between us and between the Rasul ﷺ. It's a bridge between us and between Imam Ahmed, Imam Abu Dawud. That bridge is that which we call the isnad, or the sanad, which literally means, or is translated to mean, a chain of narration, a chain of reporters. In other words, every link in the chain, the teacher came into contact with the student. The student came into contact with his student. And that student came into contact with his student. Everybody understand this? Makes sense? In other words, Muhammad right now, say you're my student. What's your name, Akhi? Shu'aib. When you go to Shu'aib, you're no longer a student. You're not a what? A sheikh. Shu'aib is your student. Muhammad is your sheikh. Use the word what? Sheikh. Everybody understand your name? Ishaq. Shu'aib and Ishaq. Tayyib. Shu'aib, you go to Ishaq. You're now Ishaq's what? Sheikh. Even though you were just a student of Muhammad. Everybody understand this? Then you become the teacher of who? Khalil. And Khalil, you're the student of Ishaq. Your name, Akhi? Muhammad. And that's the final person in the chain. You put down the report in your book. You put down what I said. So you would say, reported to me, Khalil, who reported from me. Mufti Muhammad Munir, kada, 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 dot, dot, dot. The first condition of an accepted hadith is that each link in the chain had to have what? Contact. The teacher and the student had to have contact, one way or another. Physical contact, correspondence, one way or another. The narration was directly what? Passed down. It was what? Passed down. And it can't be a breach or breakage between Shu'aib and Muhammad. It's the first condition. So any hadith that comes, and this isnad is broken, we say that it is what? Da'if, hypothetically. We hypothetically say it's what? Da'if. Even if the meaning of the hadith sounds good, and if it's accepted, and if it's a beautiful, famous hadith, it is scientifically classified as what? Da'if. The next condition is that Muhammad